I never imagined my day would take such a turn. I had only stopped by my grandmother's house to bring her some fresh bread from the bakery down the street, but the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her weathered hands gripping a pen over a thick contract, her eyes scanning the small print with a deep frown. Across from her sat a man in a sleek black suit, his fingers steepled together as he spoke in a smooth, calculated tone. "Mrs. Reynolds, I assure you, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you sign today, you'll secure a premium investment that will double your money within the year." His voice dripped with charm, but I could see the way his eyes flicked toward me, assessing the situation. He hadn't expected company. "Grandma?" I called cautiously, setting the bread down on the counter. "What's going on here?" My grandmother turned to me, her face lighting up for a second before shifting into uncertainty. "Oh, sweetheart, Mr. Thompson here was just telling me about an opportunity for my savings. He says it's a safe investment." I looked at the papers in front of her. The contract was full of legal jargon, but one thing caught my attention immediately. There was a clause stating that once she signed, she wouldn't be able to withdraw her money for 5 years. My gut twisted. "Grandma, how much were you planning to invest?" My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. She hesitated. "Almost everything, dear. He said I could triple it, and I thought, well, it could help the family." I turned to Thompson, my jaw tightening. "This sounds too good to be true." He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "I understand your concern. It's natural for younger generations to be skeptical, but this is a highly exclusive deal, one that requires swift action." "Exclusive for who?" I shot back. "For people who don't read the fine print before giving away their life savings?" His expression darkened for just a second before he forced another smile. "I assure you, everything is perfectly legitimate." My grandmother flinched slightly at the tension in the air, and I knew I had to be careful. The last thing I wanted was to upset her. I took a deep breath, turning my focus back to her. "Grandma, I know you're trying to do something good for us, but this doesn't feel right. Have you had a lawyer look at this?" She blinked. "No, I hadn't thought of that." Thompson's smile faltered. "That's not necessary, Mrs. Reynolds. I can assure you." I cut him off. "No, I think it is. And until we do, she's not signing anything." His friendly mask cracked, just a little. "With all due respect, young man, this is her decision." I met his gaze, refusing to back down. "And she's not making it without the full picture." Silence stretched between us. My grandmother's hand trembled slightly as she placed the pen down. "I think I'd like some more time," she murmured. Thompson's jaw tightened. He knew he had lost. "Of course," he said smoothly, standing up and gathering his papers. "But I must warn you, this opportunity won't last forever." I walked him to the door, watching as he adjusted his suit jacket. Before he stepped outside, he turned back, lowering his voice. "You just cost her a golden opportunity," he said, his pleasant tone gone. "No," I said firmly, staring him down. "I just saved her from a mistake." I shut the door before he could respond. My grandmother exhaled shakily behind me. "Oh, sweetheart, was I really about to make a mistake?" I turned to her, my heart aching at the vulnerability in her eyes. "Yeah, Grandma, but I'm here, and I won't let anyone take advantage of you." Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the day's surprises. Grandma sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she processed what had just happened. I pulled out a chair beside her and gently took her hand. "You okay?" She gave me a small, tired smile. "I just feel foolish, dear. I should have known better." I shook my head. "Don't blame yourself. These people are professionals at making things sound like a dream. They prey on trust." She sighed and patted my hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Before I could respond, the phone rang. Grandma turned toward it, but I was quicker, crossing the room in 2 strides to grab it. I still felt on edge after Thompson's visit. "Hello?" I said cautiously. A deep voice responded. "Is this Mrs. Reynolds?" I hesitated. "Who's asking?" The line was silent for a second. Then the man spoke again, his voice more urgent. "Please, I need to speak with her. It's about the contract she was about to sign." I stiffened. Was this someone from the same scam? I glanced at Grandma, who was watching me with concern. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice calm. I can't say over the phone, the man said. But tell her she was lucky today. She was being set up. I gripped the receiver tighter. I already figured that out. Who are you? A pause. Then, in a softer voice, he said, I'm someone who's been down that road before. Please, just don't let her sign anything. And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment before slowly setting it down. Who was it? Grandma asked. I turned back to her, my mind racing. I don't know, I admitted. But it sounds like this scam goes deeper than we thought. A sinking feeling settled in my chest. What if we hadn't caught it in time? What if Grandma had signed those papers? And more importantly, who was that caller? One thing was certain. I wasn't letting this go. The uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I paced the kitchen, replaying the phone call in my head. Who was that guy? And why did he care? Grandma stood up and placed a gentle hand on my arm. Sweetheart, maybe we should just let it go. I didn't sign anything, and that's what matters. I wished I could agree. But something about Thompson, the urgency in that mystery caller's voice, it felt like we had only scratched the surface of something much bigger. I just don't like that they targeted you, I said, running a hand through my hair. What if they come back? What if they try again with someone else? She sighed. I've lived a long time, dear. I've seen people like him before. They always come and go. But what if this one doesn't? I muttered. Before she could answer, there was a loud knock at the door. My whole body tensed. Grandma moved to answer it, but I stepped in front of her. Let me, I said, lowering my voice. I slowly cracked open the door. Standing on the porch was a different man. Not Thompson. This one looked younger, dressed in a neat but casual suit. His dark brown eyes met mine with something close to relief. Are you the one who answered the phone? He asked. I frowned. Who's asking? The man glanced past me, spotting my grandmother over my shoulder. He exhaled and nodded. Good. You're okay. I stepped forward, blocking his view. Okay, enough with the cryptic stuff. Who are you? He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card. I snatched it from his hand before he could offer it properly. Nathan Carter, Senior Advisor, Carter Investments. I narrowed my eyes. You work in finance? I do, he admitted. But I'm not here to sell anything. Then why are you here? He shifted on his feet, lowering his voice. Because I used to work with him. Thompson. I clenched my jaw. So, you're part of the same scam? His face hardened. Not anymore. That's why I called. My heart pounded. So he had been the one on the phone earlier. I need to talk to Mrs. Reynolds, Nathan said, his expression serious. Please. I looked back at Grandma. She gave me a slow nod, then stepped forward. I'll listen, she said softly. I didn't like it, but I also wanted answers. I stepped aside, letting Nathan inside. Little did I know, what he was about to tell us would change everything. Nathan stepped inside, his gaze flickering between me and Grandma. I could tell he was nervous, his hands clenched and unclenched as if he were debating how much to say. I folded my arms. Start talking. He exhaled sharply. First, I want to say, I'm not proud of the work I used to do. I got caught up in it, and by the time I realized what was really happening, it was too late. Grandma's eyes softened. And what was really happening? Nathan looked straight at her. Thompson wasn't just trying to scam you, Mrs. Reynolds. He was setting you up for something bigger. My stomach tightened. Bigger? What do you mean? Nathan rubbed his temples. This isn't just about getting people to sign bad investments. It's about control. Thompson and the people he works for. They target wealthy seniors with assets. They trap them in contracts that give them power over their finances, then slowly bleed them dry. And if the victim doesn't comply, he trailed off. Grandma frowned. What happens then? Nathan hesitated. It depends. Sometimes, they use legal loopholes to gain power of attorney. Other times, they pressure the victim into taking loans against their own home. And in the worst cases, he looked away, his jaw tight. My chest burned with anger. Let me guess. They don't just pressure people. They threaten them. Nathan nodded grimly. Or worse. I sucked in a breath. I had assumed Thompson was just another slick-talking scam artist, but this was something else entirely. Grandma gripped my arm. I could have lost everything, she whispered. I turned back to Nathan, my patience wearing thin. So why are you telling us all this? If you used to work with these guys, why betray them now? His eyes darkened. Because I saw it happen to someone I cared about. My own grandmother. The words hit like a punch. They took everything from her, he continued. Her home, her savings gone. And by the time I figured out what was happening, I couldn't stop it. She passed away a few months ago, broke and ashamed. I clenched my fists. I'm sorry, I muttered, feeling my own anger boil over. Nathan shook his head. I won't let it happen again. That's why I left. And why I've been trying to warn people before it's too late. Grandma wiped at her eyes. Thank you, dear. But does that mean Thompson will try again? Nathan sighed. Most likely. But now that he knows someone intervened, he'll change tactics. Then let him come, I said, my jaw tightening. He won't get past me. Nathan studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're protective. That's good. She's going to need you. Grandma let out a shaky breath. I just don't understand. Why me? There are people richer than I am. Nathan gave her a sad smile. Because you're comfortable. You have just enough wealth to make you a target, but not enough power to fight back if they trap you. That's their ideal victim. I hated that he was right. Nathan straightened. Listen, I know you don't trust me yet, but I want to help. I have some connections. I can make sure your accounts are protected, get you legal advice if you need it. Just be careful. I studied him for a long moment, trying to decide if I believed him. His eyes held something Thompson's never had, regret. Finally, I nodded. All right, but if you're lying to us. I'm not, Nathan said firmly, and I think you'll see that soon enough. Before I could ask what he meant, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't polite. It was loud, forceful. Grandma tensed. Nathan's expression hardened. Looks like Thompson isn't wasting any time. I moved toward the door, my pulse pounding. Time to face him head-on. The knocking grew louder, more impatient. Whoever was on the other side wasn't planning to leave quietly. I turned to Nathan. Stay with my grandmother. Then, to her, I said, no matter what happens, don't open the door. She nodded, though I could see the fear in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, I cracked the door open just enough to see outside. It was Thompson, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a taller man, broad-shouldered and dressed in an expensive gray suit. He looked older, maybe in his 50s, with sharp, calculating eyes. Unlike Thompson, he didn't smile. Good evening, Thompson said smoothly. We need to speak with Mrs. Reynolds. I stepped fully into the doorway, blocking his view. She's not interested. The man in the gray suit tilted his head slightly, observing me like I was a piece of furniture in his way. Then he spoke, his voice calm and chillingly direct. You must be the grandson. I didn't answer. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. You've interfered in something you don't understand. I smirked, though my pulse was hammering. Try me. Thompson shot me an irritated look, but kept his fake charm. There's been a misunderstanding. Mrs. Reynolds invited us to discuss her investment plans. We simply want to make sure she doesn't miss out. I let out a humorless laugh. Yeah? And I'm sure that investment has nothing to do with draining her accounts and leaving her with nothing. Thompson's jaw tightened, but the older man remained composed. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice calm, almost bored. People like us, we don't take interference lightly. My hands curled into fists at my sides. And people like me don't let crooks take advantage of their family. Silence stretched between us. Then, just when I thought things were about to escalate, the older man's lips curled into a small, unsettling smile. Very well. He adjusted his cufflinks, then turned to Thompson. Let's go. Thompson hesitated. But I said let's go. Thompson swallowed, nodded stiffly, and followed. I watched them walk down the driveway, my heart still pounding. But before getting into his sleek black car, the older man turned back, meeting my gaze. "We'll be seeing each other again," he said. And then they were gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding and locked the door behind me. Nathan and Grandma were already standing, waiting for me. "What did they say?" she asked, her voice trembling. I clenched my jaw. "They're not done with us." Nathan nodded. "That man, the one in the gray suit? He's worse than Thompson. He doesn't waste time with scams. He plays for keeps." Grandma sat down heavily in her chair. "Oh dear." I knelt beside her, squeezing her hand. "We'll figure this out, Grandma. I promise." Nathan exhaled sharply. "We don't have much time. If he's involved, then we need to be ready." I turned to him. "Then tell me, how do we stop them?" Nathan's eyes darkened. "There's only one way." And I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it. Nathan's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "There's only one way," he repeated, his expression grim. I swallowed hard. "Which is?" "We have to expose them," Nathan said. "Publicly." Grandma looked worried. "Expose them how?" Nathan turned to me. "You were right when you said this wasn't just a scam. It's a network. Thompson is small time. But the man in the gray suit? His name is Victor Langston, and he's one of the masterminds behind this entire operation." The name meant nothing to me, but from the way Nathan said it, I knew this was serious. Nathan continued. "Victor has been pulling these schemes for years, laundering money through fake investments, targeting people like your grandmother, and making sure they have no legal way out once they sign. He's careful. No one has ever been able to pin anything on him." I frowned. "So how do we?" Nathan exhaled. "We need evidence. And the only way to get it," he hesitated, "is to make them think they've won." I didn't like where this was going. "You want my grandma to pretend to go along with them?" Nathan gave me a pointed look. "Not just her. You too." Grandma gasped. "Oh no, absolutely not. It's too dangerous." I turned to her. "Grandma, they're going to come after you anyway. If we don't do something, they'll just try again. And maybe next time, it won't just be a contract. It could be worse." She looked at me with worry, but she knew I was right. Nathan leaned in. "If you can get close enough, you might be able to access their records, find proof of the scam. That's what will bring them down." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. I had never done anything like this before. But if it meant protecting Grandma and stopping these people for good, I was all in. The next morning, I made the call. I dialed Thompson's number, the one he had left on Grandma's paperwork, and forced a polite tone. "Mr. Thompson," I said, "I've been thinking. Maybe I was a little too quick to judge yesterday." There was a pause. Then his voice turned slick with satisfaction. "I knew you were a reasonable man." "I'd like to set up a meeting," I said. "Somewhere neutral. I want to make sure my grandmother is making the right decision." Thompson chuckled. "Smart. Very smart." We set the meeting for that evening at a private lounge in the city. I hung up and turned to Nathan. "Now what?" Nathan handed me a tiny recording device. "Slip this in your pocket. Get him to talk about the scam. Anything that proves he's lying. If we're lucky, he might even mention Langston." I nodded, tucking it into my jacket. My stomach churned, but I kept my face steady. For Grandma. That evening, I walked into the lounge with my heart hammering in my chest. Thompson was already there, lounging in a high-backed leather chair with a glass of whiskey in hand. "Ah, there he is," he said with a smirk. "Come sit." I sat across from him, trying to look uncertain but interested. "I have to admit," I said carefully, "I don't know much about investments. Maybe I overreacted yesterday." Thompson grinned. "Not a problem at all. I'd be happy to explain everything to you." For the next 20 minutes, he walked me through the investment opportunity, spouting off fancy terms and making it sound foolproof. I played along. I nodded, asked innocent questions, acted like I was considering it. Then I leaned in. "And how do you know these investments will pay off?" Thompson smirked. "Because we control the returns." My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. He took another sip of whiskey. "People sign the contracts, we shift the numbers around, and by the time they realize their money is gone, well, let's just say they don't have many options left." I forced myself to chuckle. "Sounds ruthless." Thompson shrugged. "That's business." I pressed further. And Langston? He oversees all this? Thompson hesitated, then gave me a knowing smile. Victor is the one who makes sure no one interferes. That was it. That was the proof we needed. I casually glanced at my watch. Well, I should check in with my grandmother before we move forward. Can I give you a call tomorrow? Thompson nodded, raising his glass. Looking forward to it. I stood, walked outside, and slipped into my car. Then I pulled out the tiny recorder, my hands shaking. Every single word was crystal clear. Back at Grandma's house, Nathan and I sat at the kitchen table, listening to the recording over and over again. This is it, Nathan said. This is enough to take them down. Who do we send it to? I asked. Nathan smiled. I have a friend in law enforcement. Someone who's been waiting for proof like this. The next morning, the audio was sent to the authorities. All we had to do was wait. A week later, it was all over the news. Investment scammer and high-level financial criminals arrested in multimillion-dollar fraud scheme. Thompson, Langston, and half their organization had been taken down. Their assets were frozen, their schemes exposed. And best of all, Grandma's name wasn't on any of their records. She was safe. I exhaled in relief as I sat beside her on the couch, watching the news unfold. You did it, sweetheart, she murmured, squeezing my hand. You saved me. I looked at her, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. I wasn't going to let them take anything from you. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? A smooth, confident voice replied, Is this the young man who stood up to Victor Langston? I frowned. Who's asking? The voice chuckled. My name is James Carter. I believe you've met my brother, Nathan. My eyes widened. Nathan's brother? Yes, James said. And I run a very different kind of financial firm. One that actually helps people. I sat up straighter. Nathan told me what you did, James continued. And I like people who don't back down from a fight. If you're looking for a job, I think I have a place for you. My mouth went dry. You want me to work for you? Let's just say, I need someone with your instincts, James said. Someone who knows how to protect the people who need it most. I looked over at Grandma, who was smiling knowingly. I didn't need to think about it. I'm in, I said. And just like that, standing up for my grandmother had led to the biggest opportunity of my life. A twist of fate I never saw coming.